Good morning, this is Kim Hammer, pastor of Saline Baptist Church, located in the community of Tull outside of Benton, with your morning devotion taken from Leviticus chapter 20, dealing with the punishment of sins. In the previous chapter, we found the various laws that God had laid down for the Israelites to follow, but not only the Israelites, but also the aliens that were living among them. In fact, chapter 20 of verse 1 says that Moses was spoken to by the Lord, and he in turn turned around and talked to the people and told them that any Israelite or any alien living in Jerusalem who gives their children to Molech must be put to death. Now, you remember from our previous class that Molech was a big graven image, brass image, had a furnace for a belly, had the arms that extended out where they would lay the children up on it as laying them on an altar, and they would roll down into the belly of Molech, and there they would burn. And it was an emotional, hyped time. It was a sexually active time. It was certainly a time that God was not invited, welcomed, and they did not want him anywhere around so that they could satisfy the lust of their flesh while they did this. And God said in chapter 20 and verse 1 that anyone who did this would be put to death by stoning. Now, there are various kinds of ways in which people could be put to death or punished for breaking the laws that we're going to see. And the first one was stoning, which we see that they did with the Israelites or the aliens who offered their children to Molech. Basically, stoning involved, they had a large pit, and around the rim of it, they would have piles of rocks. And they would throw the guilty person to be punished by stoning them to death down in the pit. And then they all would take turns lifting the stones and throwing down on them. And eventually what would happen is they'd get a concussion or broken bones, or there was enough trauma to their body that they would actually die. This is the way that Stephen died over the book of Acts chapter 7. But we find that this applies not only to the Israelites, but also to the aliens, because God made no distinction between the two, because he had instructed the two in exact manner to worship him. We find that as time goes on, and the two reasons that God took such issue with Molech, number one, he was put there by Satan. But number two, he defiled the sanctuary in that they had established their own place of worship to worship Molech away from the meeting tent out in the wilderness. And God knew that that was going to divide the nation of Israel and take them away from him and away from everything he had to offer them in the way of the blessings of life. And then the second reason was because they had profaned his holy name. He said in chapter 19, verse 1, "Be holy, because I, the Lord your God, am holy." That's what God wants. God wants us to be holy because he knows that when we are holy, we're in a close relationship with him. Now, he gives the punishments for the sin. It's one thing to tell somebody not to do something, do this, don't do this, but it's another thing to tell them about the punishment that go with it if they do break the law. And that's what we find in verses 9 through 20 pretty much, is God sharing what the punishments for the various sins would be. Now, if God did not issue such strong punishment, they would not have stopped. If God had not brought appropriate punishment to deal with the level of the sin that they were committing, they would not have stopped. In fact, they might have intensified their actions a little bit. So God measured out punishment appropriate to get them to stop, which is a sign of a loving God. You could use the scripture, spare the rod, spoil the child. The Lord chasteneth those who he loves. Those are a couple scriptures that show that discipline appropriately applied can help spare a person from repeating the same mistake or making the next mistake bigger, or developing an attitude of defiance that it doesn't matter what I do, nobody's going to hold me accountable. And so we find in chapter 20 that God lays down the laws, or lays down the punishment for the crimes that they would commit. And he had to do it in order to show his love to them by not letting them just go on doing what they were doing and thinking it would be okay. Now, if God gave people a pass, would he have violated his own commandment in Leviticus chapter 5 and verse 1? Leviticus chapter 5 and verse 1, you remember? That's the passage that says that if a person keeps silent when he knows that something's wrong and he doesn't warn somebody, that he himself is as guilty and the punishment should be equal to him. If God had not warned the people that I've given you the laws to live by, I've given you the do's and don'ts, and now I'm going to lay down the punishment that goes with it so you'll know what's coming. If God had not done that, he would have violated his own word, because he would not have warned the people of what would be coming if they didn't change from theirs or their way. So God is showing great love to the individuals by helping them understand, you break this law, you're going to receive this punishment. Now, if God did not have them held accountable for their sin, that would have infected others. Like a little yeast will leaveneth the whole lump. We find that God wanted to hold individuals accountable as soon as they did something, so as send a message to everybody else, you don't want to do this because God's not going to play. But as individuals developed these immoral lifestyles, all centered around worshiping Molech, and as it began to make its way through the congregation, God realized it was like an infection that was spreading, and it was covering ground very quickly. And so God put into his punishment for sins a way to break that cycle, because he wanted to hold people accountable that were the beginning of getting that cancerous tumor started in the nation of Israel that would take over and eventually destroy them as a nation. Their actions would be brought on by death anyway, so God used death to save the lives of others. Now, what I mean by that is that some of the punishments that are given in chapter 20 resulted in being told that they were to be put to death. Capital punishment. Capital punishment is actually taught in the Bible. Capital punishment is actually condoned in the Bible. Murder is not. But holding a person accountable because they broke the severest of laws, that has inflicted pain upon somebody else, capital punishment is actually provided and directed in the Bible. One of the things we find that as we go through the remainder of this chapter is that God would use death. God would use death any way he had to, so as to save the lives of the remaining ones there, and that they would get the message. Now, I mentioned to you a while ago the various types of ways in which people could be punished. I'll repeat them. They could be stoned to death. They could be put to death. They could be burned to death. They could be separated from the congregation and placed out in the wilderness to die. They could be held responsible, which would not necessarily involve death, but it would involve restitution for the crime that they had made. And they could also be given the punishment of being barren, because to a woman in that age, to not have children means that the curse of God is on you. And so if you were a defiant person who said, I want to do what I want to do in the flesh anyway, and I'm not going to worry about the laws, and I'm not going to worry about the punishment, I'm just going to go on and live my life and show God who he is. Well, part of the problem was that God had said for those type people that the woman would not be able to bear children. Now, one thing interesting is God did give them a way of escape. They could make atonement, and we had covered atonement processes earlier in the book of Leviticus and others. And it is not God's intent to be separated from us. It's not God's intent just to sit up on the throne and to issue decrees with punishment just to inflict pain and discomfort upon us. That is not God's primary goal. God's primary goal is to have a relationship with us, and he'll do everything he can to have a relationship, even to forgive us for the sins that we have committed. And that is one way you take care of not having to worry about all the punishment and the sins that are listed, and many more that are not listed in chapter 20, is to seek forgiveness from God, because the Bible says that God forgives all people freely and willingly. He is not one that wants to hide himself when you are seeking him to ask forgiveness for what you did. He is one that makes himself readily available, because he knows that it's much more productive for you, much more glorifying for him, if you will come before him humbly and say, I've sinned, and here's what I've done, and God will forgive you for it. And then you can live out from underneath the weight of carrying that sin around. Now, why would God go to such extremes in chapter 20, in verses 20 through 27? Chapter 20, beginning with verse 20 through 27, he gets down into the marriage and about some of the sexual activities and some of the more immoral actions of the men and women, and what they were doing and what the punishment was going to be. First of all, the person or persons who do this are selfish in that they put others around them in harm's way for violating God's code of conduct. It's not just about what they did. It was about what they influenced others to do that came in with them then and participated in the sinful act, guilt by association. Have you ever heard the expression, misery loves company? Well, sin does too. Sin loves company, because if I can get you to sin, I feel better about my sin, even though you feel worse about your sin, but I don't care because I'm selfish. I only want to feel good about myself, even if that means using you. And God knew that this was the mindset of these people. And so when he issued the punishment for these individuals, he made it severe enough to make them feel some of the pain that they had caused others to experience because they had led them astray to do what they were doing that God had told them not to do. Secondly, the people who live this kind of lifestyle have no regard for how their actions will affect others. They are very self-centered, and it's all about me, me, me. What can I do to make me feel better? How can I use you to make me feel better? And that's not a reflection of who God is. That's a reflection of who Satan is. Third thing, God establishes clear boundaries for what is allowable and what is punishable. God is a God of boundaries because he knows that there's safety within those boundaries, that once we step outside of those boundaries, we are out where Satan can get hold of us, and he will utilize all the things around us to bring further hate and discomfort and pain and regret and remorse in our life. And so God sets up some very clear boundaries. As long as we stay in those boundaries, we are protected. It's kind of like as long as you stayed in the walls of Jerusalem, you were protected. But once you went out, you were fair game to the devil because you were away from those that could ally to your side and help you if you needed them. God gives us a reward system. You know, God said, do this, don't do that. If you do this, I'm going to do that. If you don't do this, I'm going to do that. God has a reward system that has an incentive built into it that leans toward rewarding us for doing the right thing, because none of us like to get punished for doing the wrong thing. We all are motivated that we want to be rewarded when we do the right thing. And that's the way God is. When you read this, he gives them options. If you do the right thing, if you turn away from this, then this will happen. But if you don't, then this will happen. So God is a God of choices, and he wants to make sure we have that opportunity to make that choice. God gives us a reward system. God will give you an inheritance in heaven. God will set you apart from the world so that you can please God, which ultimately brings peace to you. And then finally, you must therefore make a distinction, because notice what he said in the very last verse. He said, a man or a woman who is medium or spiritualist among you must be put to death. You are to stone them. Their blood will be on their own hands. Verse 26, he said, you are to be holy to me because I, the Lord God, am holy. I have set you apart from the nations to be my own. In other words, you got a decision to be clean or unclean. You got a decision to be defiled or to be defiled or not to be defiled. And you have a decision to be holy or to be unholy. Now, why should we want to make these choices? Because the Bible says, because I, the Lord, am holy, and I have set you apart from the nations to be my own. God has made you to be holy. And the way you're holy is to live obedient to his words and to be obedient to his guidance and to apply them to your daily life so that others will see you set apart, being different than what they are, creating curiosity for them to come and have a conversation with you. And then you can tell them about how you accepted Christ as your Savior, and he set you on a new road where it's not so hard to be obedient to the guidelines and the laws that he has given you. Because for one you love, you want to be obedient to him. Hope you have a great day.